Wisdom is justified by her works. In the journey of faith and life, there is a teaching from Jesus that brings gentle, profound comfort and direction. Wisdom is justified by her works. This saying is like a warm embrace, reminding us that true wisdom does not lie in lofty words, complex theories, or a pious outward appearance. It is quietly and humbly expressed through the very actions, choices, and results we create each day. Life is sometimes full of judgments and doubts from others. People may look at your way of life and offer all sorts of commentary, just as they once criticized both Jesus and John the Baptist. But Jesus invites us to be steadfast. Instead of getting caught up in arguments or defending ourselves with words, let your deeds speak for themselves. A gesture of love, an act of forgiveness, a decision to live uprightly and with compassion. These are the sweetest fruits that prove the wisdom reigning in your soul. Time will be the most reliable answer, because a good tree bears good fruit. The wisdom of God, when we receive and express it through action, will shine forth and show its own value. Let us persevere on the path of goodness, cultivating the garden of our souls with concrete actions. Because, as another meaningful teaching says, a tree is known by its fruit. From the warm teaching, wisdom is justified by her works. Let us step deeper into the garden of philosophy cultivated by Jesus himself. Each philosophy is a seed that, when sown in the soul, will blossom into actions of love and bear the fruit of eternal peace. These are not rigid dogmas, but cool, refreshing streams flowing from the source of truth, justified not by complex reasoning, but by his very life and teachings. Before we begin, we kindly invite you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel to help spread this valuable content to your family and friends. We thank you, and now we invite you to listen. 1. Action is the language of the soul. Words can adorn the intellect, but action is what most truly reveals what is hidden deep in the heart. A commitment is just a sound until it is fulfilled by a concrete action. The soul does not speak in words. It speaks through hands that serve, through feet that seek out those in need. On a dusty road in Galilee, a learned scribe stopped Jesus and asked, "Teacher, how can I show my reverence for God?" Jesus did not answer immediately. He pointed to a farmer who was diligently mending a broken section of his absent neighbor's fence. He turned to the scribe and said, "You can recite all 5 books of Moses flawlessly, and your words are very fine. But look, that farmer's soul is singing a hymn without a single word." 2. The heart is the root. Action is the fruit. Don't just look at the brilliant flower. Examine the root that nourished it. A good deed must spring from a pure heart. If the root is pride or self-interest, then no matter how noble the action may seem, it is merely a paper flower without fragrance or life. True wisdom is to cultivate the garden of one's soul first. A wealthy man named Philo donated much gold and silver to build a magnificent synagogue. Everyone praised him. But Jesus said to his disciples, "Philo built a beautiful building, but his heart is full of calculation. He wants to buy fame from God. Look at that widow. She put only 2 small coins into the offering box, but she gave her whole heart. Her work is small, but its fruit is sweet in the eyes of the Father in heaven." 3. Wisdom is not in hoarding, but in sharing. Knowledge can be stored in a head, but wisdom only grows when it is shared with others through action. Like a well, if it only holds water for itself, it will become stagnant. But if it continuously draws water for others, a new stream will always flow, fresh and clear. James asked Jesus, "Teacher, I have read many holy books. How can I become wiser?" Jesus led him to a marketplace where an old man was teaching orphans how to read and write for free. Jesus said, "Your wisdom is like a container, while that old man's wisdom is like a canal. Your container may be full, but his canal is making a whole barren land green. Do you want to be a container or a canal?" 4. Charitable action is the most eloquent argument. When faced with criticism and opposition, the most powerful response is not sharp words, but unceasing acts of love. Perseverance in good works will extinguish the fire of slander. A kind gesture is more persuasive than 1,000 speeches. The Pharisees criticized Jesus for eating with tax collectors. They said, "If you are a man of God, why do you associate with sinners?" Instead of arguing. The next day, Jesus went to the house of Zacchaeus, a tax collector hated by the whole city of Jericho. After the encounter, Zacchaeus stood up and declared he would give back 4 times what he had cheated. Jesus turned to the murmuring crowd. "Salvation has come to this house. The work of mercy has justified itself. Do you need me to say more?" 5. A small act of love is better than a great intention in procrastination. The universe was not created by grand intentions lying on paper, but by countless concrete actions. Do not wait for an opportunity to do something extraordinary. Wisdom is knowing how to seize the small daily opportunities to sow a seed of kindness. A cup of cold water given to a thirsty person is more valuable than the promise of a lavish feast in the future. Peter said to Jesus, "Teacher, when I have the means, I will do something truly great for the kingdom of heaven." Jesus smiled, looking at a child sharing his meager piece of bread with a friend. He said to Peter, "Do not wait for tomorrow to build a temple in your imagination. Look, the kingdom of heaven is being built right now, with a piece of bread broken in love." 6. Time is the fairest judge of all actions. Words may be forgotten, fame may fade, but the result of a good deed will endure and bear fruit for generations. Do not rush to judge a work when it has just begun. Give it time. True wisdom will be proven by time, just as a small acorn needs time to grow into a mighty oak tree. When Jesus chose Matthew, a tax collector, as an apostle, many protested. They said, "Why choose a traitor to the nation?" Jesus simply said, "Wait and see." Many years later, it was Matthew who wrote a gospel, becoming a source of faith for millions. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, "That day they saw only an ugly tree, but the Father in heaven saw a whole forest hidden in that seed." 7. Wisdom does not seek attention. It creates influence. A lighthouse does not roar to prove its existence. It simply shines quietly, and in doing so, saves countless ships. The actions of the wise are the same. They do not do good to be praised, but simply to let the light of truth and love spread, naturally attracting others to the right path. A man asked Jesus, "How can we change this world?" Jesus lit a small oil lamp and placed it on a stand. He said, "You do not need to shout at the darkness. You just need to keep your lamp burning. Light, however small, has the power to dispel the darkness around it. Be that lamp, and your work will change the world by itself." 8. The work of the hands must be in harmony with the prayer of the lips. To pray for the hungry without sharing the bread you have is an incomplete prayer. Faith is not just a vertical relationship with God. It must also be expressed through a horizontal relationship with our brothers and sisters. Wisdom unites faith and action into a single symphony. John asked Jesus, "Should we pray more or work more?" Jesus took them to see a potter. He was using his feet to turn the wheel while using his hands to shape the clay. Jesus said, "Look, your faith is like those feet. It creates energy and movement. Your actions are the hands. They turn that energy into useful objects. Both must work in harmony. A faith without action is like feet that keep turning while the hands do nothing." 9. A true legacy is not what we say, but what we leave behind through our deeds. When a person passes away, the words they spoke may vanish in the wind, but the trees they planted, the bridges they built, the hearts they touched with kindness will remain. That is the true legacy, the undeniable proof of a wise life. Standing on the Mount of Olives looking down at Jerusalem, the apostles marveled at the grandeur of the temple. "How magnificent," they said. Jesus pointed to a small old irrigation system that was still faithfully watering the fields of the poor. He said, "That temple is splendid, but the day will come when not one stone will be left on another. But those ditches, dug by the hands of anonymous people, are still feeding so many. Choose which structure you want to build for your life." 10. The source of all holy works is love. Ultimately, all actions, whether great or small, only truly have value and justify wisdom when they are saturated with love. Love is the motivation, the purpose, and the essence of the wisdom that comes from God. A work without love is but a soulless corpse. After washing the disciples' feet, an act considered that of a servant, Jesus said, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I am not giving you a new theory, but a new work to do, because this work is born of love, and it will prove to the whole world that you belong to me." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 11. The value of a work is measured by the sacrifice it demands. A wise action is not just doing the right thing, but doing it with a generous heart, ready to give what is precious. To give from one's surplus is good, but to give from one's want is an act that moves heaven itself. Sacrifice is the sacred spice that turns an ordinary action into an extraordinary offering. When Mary of Bethany broke the precious alabaster jar of spikenard to anoint Jesus' feet, Judas protested, "Why this waste? This oil could have been sold to help so many poor people." Jesus replied, "The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. What she has done for me is a good thing. Your wisdom calculates in silver coins, but her wisdom is measured by a love that knows how to give everything. What she has done will be told in memory of her." 12. The greatest works are often performed in silence. The world praises works built in the light, but God treasures the works built silently in the soul. The inner battle to overcome selfishness, the quiet forgiveness of one who has hurt you, the persistent prayer in the dark of night. These are works that no one sees, but they are the foundation for all visible good deeds. Nicodemus, a Jewish leader, had to come to Jesus at night out of fear. Jesus spoke to him about being born again from above. Many might mock his timidity, but Jesus saw a great work taking place. He later said to his disciples, People saw him come into the darkness, but I saw a soul struggling to step into the light. That work is more arduous than building a city wall. 13. A wise action creates an endless ripples. Never underestimate an act of kindness, no matter how small. It is like a pebble tossed into a calm lake. You may only see a small ripple at first, but it will continue to spread far, touching shores you never expected, inspiring other good deeds. The Samaritan woman at the well, after her conversation with Jesus, hurried back to her village and told everyone. Her initial action was simply to share the good news, but the ripples from that action caused the whole village to come out to meet Jesus. Jesus said to his apostles, "I sowed only one seed in one soul, but the work of that seed, when shared, brought in a whole harvest." 14. Wisdom is also proven by how we get up after a failure. Our work is not always successful, but wisdom lies not in never stumbling, but in knowing how to turn those stumbles into stepping stones to rise higher. The act of getting up, dusting oneself off, learning from mistakes, and continuing to walk with humility is the most courageous work of all. After Peter denied him 3 times, he wept bitterly. He had failed. But after the resurrection, on the shore of the Sea of Tiberias, Jesus did not bring up that failure. He only asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And with each answer, he gave him a task. "Feed my sheep." Jesus turned Peter's failure into the foundation for his greatest pastoral mission. 15. Joy in the work is a sign of wisdom. When a work is done with love, it ceases to be a burden and becomes a joy. The wise do not just aim for the final result. They find meaning and contentment in the process itself. If your work only brings fatigue and resentment, re-examine its roots. At the home of the 2 sisters, Martha and Mary, Martha was busy and worried about serving, while Mary sat at Jesus' feet, listening to his words. Martha complained. Jesus said, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better." Martha's work was necessary, but Mary's work was filled with joy and peace because it stemmed from connection and love. 16. Hasty action is the enemy of sustainable wisdom. A tree needs time to set deep roots before it can stand firm against the storm. Similarly, a wise work requires patience and deliberation. Acting on a momentary impulse, even with good intentions, can lead to unforeseen consequences. Wisdom is knowing when to act quickly and when to wait in silence. When the Samaritans did not welcome Jesus, the 2 disciples, James and John, became angry. "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?" Jesus rebuked them. "You do not know what kind of spirit you are of. The Son of Man did not come to destroy, but to save." The action they proposed stemmed from anger, not from the understanding and patient wisdom of God. 17. The work of the wise is to build bridges, not walls. Knowledge can create boundaries, prejudices, and walls that separate us from them. But wisdom always seeks to break down those barriers with acts of compassion and understanding. Every work that aims to connect people is the work of the kingdom of heaven. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, the priest and the Levite passed by the man who had been attacked. Laws and status had built a wall in their hearts. But the Samaritan, a despised outcast, stopped, bandaged his wounds, and took care of him. Jesus asked the expert in the law, Which of these three was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? He did not ask who had more knowledge, but who had acted. The work of mercy redefined the concept of neighbor. 18. True wisdom always goes hand in hand with humility. The actions of the truly wise are never ostentatious. They do good not to be recognized by the world, but because it is the right thing to do. Like the roots of a tree that silently nourish the trunk, humble action is the invisible strength behind beautiful fruits. When he washed the disciples' feet, Jesus did the work of a servant. Peter refused, seeing it as unworthy of his master's dignity. But Jesus said, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." He taught that the greatest work in the kingdom of heaven is the act of humble service. Wisdom does not sit on a throne. It kneels to lift others up. 19. Action is how we make faith a reality. Faith is not an abstract concept. It is a power that needs to be shaped. Action is the potter's hands, molding the clay of belief into useful vessels for life. A faith without action is like a good seed that is never planted in the ground. A father had 2 sons. He told the first, "Son, go and work today in the vineyard." He answered, "I will, sir." But he did not go utongtut. Go. The father also spoke to the second son, who replied, "I will not." But later he changed his mind and went. Jesus asked, which of the 2 did what his father wanted? The actual work proved obedience, not the empty promise. 20. Wisdom knows that rest is also part of the work. A wise farmer knows to let the land rest for a bountiful harvest. A wise woodcutter knows to sharpen his axe. Similarly, wisdom teaches us that silence, rest, and prayer are not laziness, but necessary actions to regenerate energy and clarity for the work ahead. After the apostles returned from their preaching mission, they joyfully reported all they had done. Jesus did not rush to give them a new task. He said, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." He taught that a tired soul cannot do beautiful work. The act of withdrawing to reconnect with God is the foundational work for all ministry. 21. The act of healing is the highest expression of God's power. Of all works, the act of bringing healing to the body, soul, and spirit is the clearest reflection of a compassionate wisdom. It is a work that directly combats chaos, suffering, and death, bringing the kingdom of heaven closer to the world. When John the Baptist was in prison, he sent his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come?" Jesus did not give a theological answer. He said, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk. Those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." These acts of healing were the answer, the most eloquent proof. 22. Wisdom. Not only does good works, but it also enables others to do good works. A wise person doesn't just give a fish, they teach how to fish. Their work does not stop at solving an immediate problem, but also involves empowering, awakening potential, and inspiring others to become agents of positive change themselves. Jesus did not heal everyone by himself. He chose 12 apostles, and then 72 disciples, gave them authority, and sent them out. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few." His greatest work was not to harvest the entire field himself, but to train and send out other harvesters. 23. The work of the wise brings order to chaos. This world is full of the chaos of greed, fear, and injustice. Every act of righteousness, truth, and love, however small, is like a candle lit in the darkness, a harmonious note amidst discordant sounds. The work of the wise is to help restore the harmony that God intended. When Jesus calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee, the disciples were amazed. That physical storm was also an image of the storms within the human heart. His powerful act not only brought peace to the sea, but was also a lesson. The wisdom of God has power over all chaos, and our job is to trust and act according to His guidance to bring peace. 24. The nameless work is the work most pleasing to God. The world remembers the names of kings and generals, but God remembers the quiet acts of service of anonymous people. Wisdom does not seek a place on the world's honor roll. It only desires to have its name written in God's book of life. Jesus said to His disciples, "When you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." He spoke of the day of judgment, when the king will say to the righteous, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink." They will ask in surprise, "When did we see you?" The king will reply, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." The works they did were all nameless, uncredited, yet they are the standard of the kingdom of heaven. 25. The act of forgiveness is the work that recreates the world. Every act of revenge and resentment is another brick in the prison of division. Conversely, every act of forgiveness is an act of liberation, breaking the chains of the past and opening up a new future. Wisdom knows that forgiveness is not weakness, but the most powerful work that can heal the world. While hanging on the cross, in the midst of extreme agony, Jesus performed one final work. He did not curse, nor did He call for revenge. He prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." This act of forgiveness shook the foundations of the universe, demonstrating a wisdom far beyond all human logic and opening the way of salvation for all. 26. Wisdom acts based on what is eternal. The world builds on the sand of fame, wealth, and power. Those structures will eventually collapse. True wisdom, however, builds on the rock of love, truth, and mercy. These works may not be glamorous, but they will last forever. Jesus concluded the Sermon on the Mount with the parable of the two builders. The foolish man built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the house fell with a great crash. The wise man built his house on the rock. The storm came, but the house stood firm. He explained, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man." The work of practicing the Lord's words is the act of building one's life on an eternal foundation. 27. A genuine action has the power to transform the one who performs it. We often think that our actions change the world outside, but the deeper truth is that every time we perform an act of kindness, patience, or courage, we ourselves are being transformed from within. Work not only creates a product, it also shapes the worker. The rich young man asked Jesus how to gain eternal life. Jesus told him to keep the commandments. The man said he had kept them since he was a boy. Jesus looked at him with love and proposed a task. "Go, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and then come, follow me." This work was not just to help the poor. More importantly, it was designed to free the man himself from his attachment to wealth, transforming him into a free person. 28. The work of wisdom is to make the ordinary extraordinary. The wisdom of God does not need expensive materials. It can take things the world considers small, weak, and ordinary, and turn them into instruments for great things. Mud, plain water, a few loaves of bread, uneducated fishermen, all can become vehicles for his power. At the wedding at Cana, when the wine ran out, Jesus did not create wine from thin air. He told the servants, "Fill the stone jars with water." They performed a very ordinary task, but it was through that act of obedience that Jesus turned ordinary water into the finest wine. Our job is to do ordinary things with extraordinary faith. 29. Action is the visible yes to God's will. To pray your will be done is good, but true wisdom is to turn that prayer into concrete actions in daily life. Every time we choose to do what is right instead of what is easy, choose love over hate, choose to serve rather than demand, we are saying yes with our actions. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed in agony, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." This prayer was completed not when he finished speaking, but when he stood up, faced those who came to arrest him, and began his passion. The act of walking according to the Father's will was the most complete yes. 30. The ultimate work of wisdom is to love. If you peel back all the layers, all the forms, all the results, the core of all wise work is just one thing: love. To love God and to love one's neighbor. Every action, whether preaching to a crowd or just giving a cup of cold water, if done in love, is the most complete work, the most eloquent justification for immortal wisdom. A teacher of the law asked Jesus which was the most important commandment. Jesus did not give a list of tasks. He summarized everything into two actions of the heart, two works of the soul. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. This is the first work, and also the last. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 31. The work of the wise turns a noisy marketplace into a monastery and a small kitchen into an altar. Holiness is not only found in temples or quiet places, it is proven right in the midst of the worries of daily life. A fair business transaction, a kind word to a shopkeeper, a meal cooked with love, are all acts of worship. The wise do not flee the world, they sanctify it with their work. The disciples saw Jesus frequently go into crowded marketplaces. Thomas asked, "Teacher, this place is full of deceit and noise. Why do you come here?" Jesus pointed to a shoemaker who was meticulously mending a pair of sandals for a poor old woman and charging only a very small fee. He said, "Do you hear that? Amidst all this chaotic sound, the tapping of his hammer beats to a rhythm of righteousness. His workbench is more sacred than the altar of those who only pray with their lips." 32. Wisdom is not about doing many things, but about doing the right thing. Our energy and time are finite. Therefore, an important part of wisdom is the ability to discern. What is the work God is calling us to do, and what are the distractions of the world? Doing one thing according to God's will is better than doing 100 things just to satisfy one's ego. Large crowds from other towns came to find Jesus. The disciples wanted him to stay to build his reputation, but Jesus said, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." He knew his core mission clearly. Wisdom is not swayed by the applause of the crowd. It remains faithful to its original purpose. 33. Action without compassion is an empty shell. You can follow all the procedures, obey all the rules, but if your work lacks the heart of compassion, it becomes soulless and even cruel. The wisdom of God always places people above rules, love above judgment. When Jesus healed the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath, the Pharisees were watching to accuse him. Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" They remained silent. Their work was to protect the law mechanically. Jesus' work was to restore dignity and life to a human being. His compassion justified his action. 34. The work of the wise is to plant seeds for future generations. The short-sighted person only does things that bring immediate results for themselves. The wise person plants trees under whose shade they may never sit. They act not just for the present, but for a better future for their children and their community. Jesus told his disciples about the mustard seed, the smallest of seeds, which grows into a large tree where birds can nest. He said, "Your work of preaching now may seem small and not well received, but do not be discouraged. You are planting a seed of the kingdom of heaven. One day it will become a great tree, and many generations will find shelter in it." 35. An enemy can be the sharpest whetstone for your work. Opposition and criticism, though painful, can also be an opportunity for us to re-examine our work, to make it sharper and purer. The wise are not defeated by opposition. They use it as a tool to cultivate patience and strengthen their convictions. The tricky questions from the scribes and Pharisees constantly tested Jesus. But after each encounter, his teaching became even clearer and more powerful. He told his disciples, "A skilled sailor is not made on a calm sea. It is the storms that force the roots of your tree to grip deeper into the soil of faith." 36. The most important work is to build people, not empires. The world measures success by the size of empires, the abundance of wealth. But the wisdom of God measures success by the spiritual growth of the people we have influenced. Taking time to teach, support, and love one person is a greater work than building a pyramid. Jesus spent most of his 3-year ministry just being with and training 12 ordinary men. From an efficiency standpoint, this might seem illogical. But he knew that the work of building these 12 men would be the foundation for a structure that would last for all eternity. A structure that no worldly power could destroy. 37. Action is the bridge between the visible and the invisible world. Faith is the awareness of an invisible reality. But that reality needs a point of contact with our world. Action is that point of contact. Every act done in faith is a way we pull a small piece of the kingdom of heaven down to earth. After a fruitless night of fishing, Peter and his companions were washing their nets. Jesus told him, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Logically, this was a futile act. Peter said, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." But then he added, "But because you say so, I will let down the nets." That act of obedience against logic became the bridge for a great miracle to happen. 38. Wisdom knows how to use the broken pieces of life to create a work of art. No one has a perfect life. Everyone has failures, hurts, broken pieces. The foolish try to hide or discard those pieces. The wise gather them, and with God's grace, piece them together into a unique mosaic, bearing the beauty of redemption and the strength of resilience. A woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years had spent all she had to no avail. She was a broken piece of society. But she performed an act of ultimate faith. She pushed through the crowd to touch the edge of Jesus' cloak. That act transformed her shattered life into a story of healing and a lesson for everyone, including the apostles. 39. The work of wisdom is to turn enemies into friends. The logic of the world is to destroy the enemy. The logic of the kingdom of heaven is to love your enemies and pray for them. This is one of the most difficult works, but also the most revolutionary. An act of love towards an enemy has the power to break the cycle of hatred and create the possibility of reconciliation. When Paul, then known as Saul, was on his way to Damascus to persecute Christians, Jesus did not appear to destroy him. He appeared, dialogued with him, and called him. Jesus' work was not to eliminate an enemy, but to transform that enemy into the most zealous apostle. This act demonstrates a wisdom that surpasses all human strategies. 40. Action is the signature of a free soul. A slave acts out of fear or coercion. A free person acts out of love and choice. The work of the wise is not mechanical compliance, but a joyful and voluntary response to the call of truth. Every good deed is a declaration of our inner freedom. Jesus said, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord." His journey to Jerusalem and his passion were not a tragic fate he was forced to endure. It was a series of voluntary actions, a work performed with the highest freedom, stemming from an infinite love for humanity. 41. The action of the wise always creates space for others. The arrogant person works to occupy all the space, to be the center of attention. The wise person works to create space for others, to exist, to grow, and to shine. They lift others up, rejoice in their success, and see it as their own success. John the Baptist had a large following of disciples, but when Jesus appeared, he performed a work of supreme wisdom. He pointed to Jesus and said, "Behold the Lamb of God." And he told his own disciples, "He must become greater, I must become less." His job was to prepare the way, and when the one who was to come had arrived, he joyfully stepped into the background. 42. Action is a prophecy of the world you want to create. Every time you choose honesty over deceit, you are prophesying a just world. Every time you choose forgiveness over revenge, you are prophesying a peaceful world. Your work is not just a reaction to the current world, it is an act of creating and proclaiming a better world. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus did not just give laws. He painted a picture of a new world through the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers. Each of these Beatitudes invites a specific kind of action, and each action is a prophecy, a way of making the kingdom of heaven visible right now. 43. Wisdom knows that sometimes the best action is no action. In a world that glorifies busyness, the ability to stop, observe, and wait in silence is an act of profound wisdom. Not every problem requires immediate intervention. Sometimes our work is simply to trust in God's timing and allow things to unfold as they should. When his friend Lazarus was sick, Jesus did not rush to him immediately. He waited. This inaction caused Martha and Mary distress and confusion, but it was that waiting that created the space for a greater work to happen, not just a healing, but a resurrection, to display the glory of God. 44. Our work is a mirror reflecting the image of the God we believe in. If you believe in a God who is judgmental and punishing, your work will be critical and exclusive. If you believe in a God who is merciful and patient, your work will be full of forgiveness and tolerance. Look at your actions, and you will see what kind of God you are worshipping. The Pharisees wanted to stone the woman caught in adultery because they believed in a God of strict law. Jesus did an unexpected thing. He bent down and wrote on the ground. Then he said, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." His work reflected a God of mercy, one who gives people a second chance. 45. Every act of gratitude is an act that multiplies miracles. A miracle doesn't just end when it happens. It is continued and multiplied through the act of gratitude. Gratitude acknowledges the gift, honors the giver, and opens our hearts to receive more graces. The work of giving thanks is fertile ground for new miracles. After healing 10 lepers, only one, a Samaritan, returned to give thanks. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Then he said to the one who returned, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." His act of gratitude was not just a courtesy. It completed his healing, bringing him full salvation. 46. The work of the wise is to turn pain into empathy. Everyone experiences suffering. The fool lets pain make them bitter and closed off. The wise person allows pain to soften their heart, turning it into a bridge of empathy to connect with the pain of others. The work of transforming personal pain into universal compassion is a spiritual alchemy. Jesus, called in Scripture a man of suffering and familiar with pain, did not let his sufferings be in vain. It is because he experienced all human trials, except sin, that he is able to empathize with our weaknesses. His work of enduring suffering became the source of comfort and empathy for all humanity. 47. Your actions are a letter sent to the future. Paul said that the faithful are a letter from Christ, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. Every work you do, every choice you make, is a word in that letter. Future generations will read your life as a testimony. Ask yourself, what does the letter I am writing say? Jesus himself left no book written by his own hand. His legacy is a living community, a church built on the actions and witness of the apostles. His work was to write on human hearts. And that letter, for 2,000 years, is still being read and spread. 48. Wisdom is not afraid to get its hands dirty. False holiness keeps its distance from what it considers unclean. True wisdom is willing to go into the muddiest places of life, to touch the most painful wounds, to bring healing. Jesus touched a leper, ate with sinners, and allowed a woman considered unclean to touch him. His work demonstrated that there is no human filth that the mercy of God cannot cleanse. A disciple might have hesitated when Jesus told him to enter the compound of the lepers. Jesus might have said, "You cannot heal a wound if you are afraid to touch it. You cannot bring light into darkness if you are not willing to step into it. Do not be afraid, for the holiness of God is not something that gets infected by sin, but something that has the power to conquer it. 49. Every work done in love is an act of worship. We often separate work and worship. But for the wise, every task, from sweeping the floor and caring for the sick to teaching or managing, if offered to God with a loving heart, becomes a prayer, a true act of worship. The carpenter of Nazareth, for 30 years, did the ordinary work of a craftsman. No miracles, no sermons. But every stroke of the plane, every cut of the saw, done faithfully to support his family, was a silent act of worship. His work prepared him for his public ministry, proving that greatness lies in faithfulness to small things. 50. In the end, all work comes down to one question. Did you love? When all projects are completed, when all words have been spoken, when life comes to an end, wisdom will be judged by a single measure. Not how much you accomplished, how much money you made, or how much fame you acquired. The final question will be, how much did you love? Because the greatest work, the ultimate justification for wisdom, is a life lived completely in love. On the seashore, after everything had passed, Jesus did not ask Peter about his leadership skills, his eloquence, or his courage. He asked one question 3 times, drilling down to the core of everything. Simon, son of John, do you love me? And the answer to that question became the foundation for all the later work of the great apostle. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. That is the beginning work, and also the completion of all things. Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 51. Before the work of the hands, there must be the work of the ears. Listening is the first act of wisdom. In a noisy world that constantly urges us to speak and to do, wisdom begins with the silent act of listening. Listening to the voice of God in prayer, listening to the needs of others through their unspoken words, and listening to the truth in our own hearts. An action not born of deep listening is often just noise. A group of enthusiastic people wanted to follow Jesus, competing to talk about what they would do for him. Jesus led them to a stream and said, "Be quiet and listen." At first, they only heard the sound of running water. But gradually, they heard the wind in the leaves, the song of a distant bird. Jesus said, God does not only speak in thunder, he also speaks in whispers. Your first job is not to tell the world about God, but to listen to God speak through the world. 52. The hardest work is sometimes to hold back a word. The power to build lies in words, but so does the power to destroy. A hasty judgment, a harsh criticism, can demolish what someone else has built over years. Wisdom is not just knowing what to say, but also when to be silent. The act of bridling the tongue is a work that requires more strength than building a wall. When brought before Pilate and accused of many things, Jesus performed a powerful work. He remained silent. His silence was not weakness or fear. It was the silence of one who knew that some truths cannot be defended by words before ears that are closed. His work at that moment was to let the truth speak for itself through his very being. 53. Sometimes the most important work is simply to be present. We often equate our value with what we do, but wisdom knows that our full presence, with all our love and attention, can be a greater gift and a more healing work than any other action. To be with someone who is suffering without saying anything, simply being there, is a work of profound compassion. When Jesus visited Martha and Mary, Martha did a lot of work serving, but Mary did a different work. She sat at the Lord's feet and listened. Her act of being present did not produce a physical meal, but it nourished the soul and brought joy to Jesus himself. He confirmed that the work of presence was the better part. 54. Hope is not a feeling, it is a work. When everything is dark and desperate, hope is not wishful thinking. Hope is a conscious action, a work of the will. It is the act of choosing to believe in the light when you only see darkness, choosing to sow seeds in barren ground, and persevering in doing good even when you don't see immediate results. In the boat during the storm, while the apostles were terrified, Jesus was sleeping. Their work at that moment was not just to row. The harder work was to fight the fear in their hearts and maintain the hope that the Master's presence, though silent, was enough to protect them. Awakening hope is the work that counters the greatest storm in the soul. 55. The work of wisdom is to prepare the soil, not just demand the fruit. Everyone wants to see fragrant flowers and sweet fruit, but few want to do the work of plowing, picking out stones, and fertilizing. Wisdom knows that a bountiful harvest is the result of quiet, tedious preparatory work. Do not despise preparatory actions, for they are the invisible foundation of all visible success. The entire ministry of John the Baptist was a work of preparation. He called himself a voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord. He was not the Messiah. He was just the one who went ahead to clear the path. His work did not bring him personal glory, but without his preparatory work, many would not have been ready to receive Jesus. 56. Behind every great work are silent, unnamed works. The world only sees the person on stage, but wisdom is grateful for those who built the stage, pulled the curtain, and lit the lights. A work is never the product of a single individual. It is always supported by a network of silent serving actions. The work of the wise is to recognize and be grateful for that support. The Gospels record that there were women who followed and provided for them out of their own means. The preaching work of Jesus and the apostles might not have been possible without the practical and quiet service of these women. Jesus valued that work, teaching us that in the kingdom of heaven, no work is small. 57. The power of a work is multiplied when we do it together. A single thread is easily broken, but many threads woven together form a strong rope. There are tasks that one person cannot do, but become possible with cooperation. Wisdom is not about trying to be a lone hero, but about knowing how to create unity to accomplish great things together. 4 men worked together to carry a paralyzed man and lowered him through the roof to get to Jesus. It was a work that required coordination, faith, and a common determination. The Bible says that Jesus, seeing their faith, healed the man. The miracle came not just from one person's faith, but from the united work of a group. 58. Wisdom also knows when a work is completed and it is time to let go. Clinging to a finished work prevents new works from being born. The farmer must harvest the rice to prepare for a new season. The teacher must let the students graduate so they can start their own careers. The work of letting go, though it may be painful, is an act of faith that paves the way for growth and new possibilities. When Jesus ascended into heaven, it was an act of letting go. His work on earth was finished. He had to leave so that the Holy Spirit could come and begin a new phase of the work of salvation. His departure was not an end, but an act of empowerment, turning the apostles from followers into leaders. 59. The work of the kingdom of heaven is like yeast in the dough. Yeast works silently, invisibly, and slowly. You cannot see it working, but it has the power to make the whole batch of dough rise. The work of the wise is the same. Do not be discouraged if your good deed seems small and does not create immediate change. It is working quietly and will powerfully transform the environment around it. Jesus told the parable of the woman who took a little yeast and mixed it into a large amount of flour. She did not sit and watch the yeast work. She simply did the work of mixing it in, and then trusted in its inherent power. Our job is to sow small acts of love and trust that the Holy Spirit will make them fruitful. 60. The work of the wise is to create beauty. God did not just create useful things, He also created beauty. A lily, a sunset. Beauty nourishes the soul and reminds us of a higher reality. Therefore, any work that brings harmony, order, and beauty to the world, whether in art, cleaning a garden, or arranging a home, is an act that reflects the wisdom of the Creator. Jesus told His disciples to consider the lilies of the field. He pointed out that not even King Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. He taught that God's work is not just about material provision, but also about the free gift of beauty. Our work can also be such a gift of beauty. 61. Action is faith finding its feet. Faith, if it remains only in the mind, is like a bird in a cage. It may be beautiful, but it cannot fly. Action is the wings of faith, the way our beliefs take flight and soar in the real world, turning inner convictions into visible realities. When Jesus called His first disciples, they were doing their daily work of fishing. He said, "Follow me." And the scripture records an immediate action. At once they left their nets and followed Him. Their faith was not just a mental agreement, it immediately found its feet in the act of leaving and following. 62. Wisdom does not hoard blessings, it becomes a channel for them. A lake that holds water only for itself becomes stagnant. A flowing river brings life to an enter region. Similarly, the wise do not try to accumulate grace and blessings for themselves. They turn their lives into a channel so that what they receive from God can flow through them to others. After the multiplication of the loaves, Jesus did not distribute the bread to the crowd Himself. He gave the bread to the disciples, and the disciples gave it to the people. He turned them into channels. Their job was not to create the miracle, but to participate in the work of distributing God's blessings. 63. The work of wisdom is to keep the fire burning, not to curse the darkness. When faced with evil and injustice, the natural reaction is to get angry and curse. But wisdom knows that the most effective way to dispel darkness is to light a fire. An act of love, a gesture of forgiveness, a word of truth, are candles that are more powerful than 1,000 curses. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." He did not say, "You are the judges of the world." The job of light is not to complain about the darkness, but simply to shine. Focus on keeping the fire of your faith and love burning, and the darkness will have to retreat on its own. 64. Sincere action is a prayer that needs no words. God does not only hear the prayers of the lips, He also hears the actions of the heart and hands. A job done with dedication and love, a silent sacrifice for others, an effort to bring about justice. All are powerful forms of prayer that reach up to heaven. The widow at the temple put in only 2 small coins. In terms of quantity, it was an insignificant act. But Jesus heard the prayer behind that action. He said, "This poor widow has put in more than all the others." Her work was a prayer of complete trust and offering. 65. Your work is the answer to the question, "Who am I?" You are not what you think you are, nor are you what others say about you. You are the sum of your actions and choices. Every day, through the work you do, you are sculpting the statue of your own being. Wisdom is being aware that you are the sculptor of your own soul. When John the Baptist sent his disciples to ask Jesus who he was, he did not give a title. He answered with a summary of his works. "Go back and report to John what you see and hear." He let his actions define him. Our work is also the most authentic answer to our identity. 66. Wisdom knows the difference between busyness and fruitfulness. A boat can make a lot of waves and noise, but if it's just going in circles, it's not going anywhere. Do not confuse activity with meaningful work. Wisdom requires us to stop regularly and ask ourselves, is the work I'm doing actually bringing me and others closer to the shore of truth and love? Jesus often withdrew to deserted places to pray, even when many people were looking for him. To the world, this might seem inefficient, but for him, it was the necessary work to reconnect with the source, to ensure that all his subsequent actions stemmed from the Father's will, not from pointless busyness. 67. The greatest work is to help another person realize their own worth. You can give people money or food, but the greatest gift you can give is to help them see the image of God in themselves, to see the dignity and potential they hold. The work of lifting others up is not to make them a copy of yourself, but to help them become the best version of themselves. When he met Zacchaeus, a man despised by society, Jesus did not lecture him on sin. He did a simple thing. "I must stay at your house today." That act of recognition and respect helped Zacchaeus see his own worth, and he willingly transformed his life. 68. Your action is the seed. The world is the field, and God is the one who makes it grow. Our task is not to guarantee the outcome. Our task is to be faithful in sowing seeds of kindness and truth every day. Do not worry if you don't see the plant grow immediately. Trust in the life of the seed and in the Lord of the harvest. Your job is to sow. The growing is God's work. In the parable of the sower does only one thing: sow the seed. He does not control the type of soil the seed falls on. Jesus taught that our job is to generously sow the word of God and good deeds, and to accept that the results will vary. Wisdom is being faithful to the work of planting, not being obsessed with the yield. 69. Tomorrow's work is built on today's faithfulness. Do not dream of great deeds in the future if you are not faithful in the small responsibilities before you. The path to great achievements is paved with the stones of faithfulness in every small task. The wisdom of God does not trust those who only talk about the future. He trusts those who are doing today's work well. In the parable of the talents, the servant who was given 5 talents and earned 5 more was praised. The master said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. The work of today, however small, is the test and preparation for greater responsibilities. 70. The work never ends. It is only passed on. The work of the kingdom of heaven does not belong to one individual or one generation. It is a great relay race. Wisdom is knowing that our role is to run our leg of the race well, and then pass the torch of faith and action to the next generation. Our greatest legacy is not the project we complete, but the people we inspire to continue the work. Before ascending to heaven, Jesus' final command was not a farewell, but a transfer of work. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations. He had completed his part, and now he passed that work on to the apostles, and through them to all of us. The work of wisdom is an ever-flowing river, and we are invited to be a part of that eternal flow. 71. The first work is not to do, but to receive. The wise know they must open their hands to receive before they have anything to give. We live in a world that values action and self-reliance, but the path of wisdom begins with an act of humility, recognizing our emptiness and opening our hearts to receive. You cannot pour a glass of water from an empty pitcher. The first and most fundamental work is to let God fill your pitcher with His love and grace. On the seashore, the apostles boasted to Jesus about their grand plans. Jesus just silently watched an empty seashell on the sand, letting each wave wash in and fill it. He said, "You want to fill the world with my words, but your own souls are closed. Learn the lesson of the seashell. Its job is not to find water, but to open itself to let the ocean pour in. Let the Father's love fill you first." 72. Our actions are not to earn God's love, but to respond to the love He has freely given. A hired hand works to get paid. A son works out of love and gratitude for his parents. Wisdom frees us from the mindset of a hired hand who is always trying to earn merit to be loved by God. The action of the wise is a joyful thank you, a free response to a love that has been given unconditionally. When Zacchaeus climbed the tree to see Jesus, he had no intention of changing. But when Jesus came and accepted him, that love transformed him. His actions, "Half of my possessions I give to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount," were not a price to buy salvation. They were a celebration of gratitude, a work born from the joy of someone who had just received a priceless gift. 73. We are the pen, and God is the one who holds it. The job of a pen is to let the artist's hand move it. Pride whispers that success is due to our own talent. Wisdom knows that all strength to do good comes from God. Our job is not to try to be strong, but to become supple and available in God's hands. When we succeed, it is because of Him. When we are weak, it is an opportunity for His power to be shown. After Peter and John healed the lame man at the temple gate, the people were amazed and praised them. But Peter did a work of wisdom. He said loudly, "Fellow Israelites, why does this surprise you? Why do you stare at us as if by our own power or godliness we had made this man walk?" He immediately gave the glory back to its owner. 74. The work of the wise is to start with the smallest thing, right where you are. Many people never start anything because they are waiting for a grand opportunity, a perfect project. But wisdom knows that every great oak tree starts from a tiny seed. Do not despise the small acts of kindness, honesty, and patience in daily life. Those are the very bricks that build a great edifice. When the disciples asked who was the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus did not point to someone with glorious achievements. He placed a little child among them and said, "Whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest." The greatest work begins with the act of humility and embracing what is small. 75. The greatest joy is not in the results of the work, but in the collaboration with God itself. When you know that you are not working alone, but are co-workers with God, Cor 3:9, then even the most difficult tasks become light. The joy is not just in the destination, but in every step of the journey, knowing that an invisible hand is working with you, supporting you, and rejoicing with you. When the 72 disciples returned from their mission, they were joyful and said, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." Their joy was not just because of the power they had, but because they had experienced the wonderful feeling of participating directly in God's work. Jesus shared that joy with them and pointed them to a greater joy. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. 76. The most important work is sometimes dismantling. Before you can build a new house, you must tear down the old, rotten structures. Similarly, before we can perform new acts of wisdom, we must do the difficult work of dismantling the prejudices, bad habits, and false beliefs that are deeply ingrained in our minds. Before Peter could do the work of preaching to the Gentiles, he had to do an internal work. God showed him a vision of unclean animals and told him to eat. The work of dismantling the wall of prejudice about cleanliness in Peter's mind was the prerequisite for him to be able to build the bridge of the gospel to all nations. 77. Your actions will reshape your love. We think that love motivates action, but the reverse is also true. Action can train and redirect our love. Every time you choose to act for others instead of for yourself, you are making selfless love grow and selfish love shrink. The work of wisdom is to use action to recalibrate the compass of the heart. Jesus told the rich young man, "Go, sell your possessions. Then come, follow me." This work of selling possessions was not just a charitable act. It was a spiritual exercise designed to shift his love away from material wealth and place it on God. That action had the power to reshape his very being. 78. Be careful not to let work for God become an idol that replaces God himself. This is a subtle trap in the spiritual life. We can become so busy with religious activities and charitable projects that we no longer have time to be in the presence of the one we are serving. When the work becomes more important than the relationship, it has become an idol. The story of Martha and Mary is a timeless warning. Martha was doing work for the Lord, but that work made her anxious and annoyed, and she even criticized the Lord himself. She had let the work obscure her honored guest. Wisdom is knowing how to balance service and contemplation, action and prayer. 79. Sometimes a decisive action is necessary to create space for holiness. Gentleness does not mean weakness. Wisdom sometimes demands strong actions to protect what is sacred. There are times when our work is to clean house, to drive out what is defiling the temple of our soul or community, to create a space where silence and prayer can return. Jesus' action of overturning the tables of the money changers in the temple seems full of anger, but it was a work of wisdom. He was performing a painful surgical act to remove the tumor of greed in order to restore the temple's true function, to be a house of prayer for all nations. 80. The work of self-examination is the foundation of all correction. It is easy to see the flaws in others' work, but very difficult to recognize the weaknesses in our own. Wisdom begins with the courageous act of looking in the mirror and asking, "What do I need to change?" Without the work of honest self-examination, all attempts to correct others are just hypocrisy. Jesus said, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" He taught that the first job, before trying to help anyone else, is the difficult and painful work of removing the plank from our own eye. It is a work of humility and self-knowledge. 81. The work of memory is to turn the past into fuel for the present. Memory is not just a storage facility, it is a fire. When we actively do the work of remembering, recalling the times God has helped, the miracles He has performed, the promises He has made, we are taking firewood from the past to kindle the fire of faith and courage for today's challenges. At the Last Supper, Jesus established a work of memory. He said, "Do this in remembrance of me." The Mass is not just a ritual. It is an active work of remembering the Lord's sacrifice, and that very memory becomes the strength and life for the Church in all its actions. 82. Wisdom doesn't just tolerate diversity. It works to weave diversity into unity. A beautiful mosaic is made of many small stones of different colors. The beauty lies in their harmonious combination. Similarly, the work of wisdom in a community is not to make everyone identical, but to respect different gifts and talents, and to weave them together for a higher common purpose. On the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit did not make everyone speak the same language. On the contrary, He made it so that people speaking different languages could understand each other. The work of the Spirit is not to erase diversity, but to create a transcendent unity in the midst of that diversity. 83. Every creative act is a declaration of war against decay. This world operates under the law of entropy, of decay and death. Every act of life, of creation, whether planting a tree, writing a poem, raising a child, or building a loving community, is an act that defies that law. The work of wisdom is to side with life and rebirth. Jesus' raising of Lazarus was not just a miracle for one family. It was a symbolic act, a declaration that love is stronger than death, and that life has power over decay. Every action we do in love is a participation in that death-defying work. 84. Our works in this life are the stones that will be used to build the new heaven and new earth. The Bible does not say that our works will be completely burned up. It says they will be tested by fire. What is built with cheap materials like wood, hay or straw, pride, selfishness, will be consumed. But what is built with gold, silver, costly stones, love, truth, mercy, will survive. Our work in this life has eternal value. Jesus, after His resurrection, had a body that was both familiar and transformed. That is an image of our work. The loving actions we do in this life will not be erased, but will be transformed and become part of the glorious reality in God's kingdom. 85. True work brings rest, not exhaustion. Jesus invites, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." But right after that, He says, "Take my yoke upon you." This seems contradictory, but wisdom shows that true rest is not doing nothing. True rest is finding the right yoke, the work that God designed for you. A yoke that fits, a work of love that gives life instead of taking it away. A carpenter can work all day and feel fulfilled, while someone sitting idle can feel tired from worry. The work Jesus invites us to is an easy yoke and a light burden, because it is a work done in and for love. 86. All works will pass away. Only the work of love remains. You can build pyramids, compose symphonies, create empires, but all of these things will fade with time. The ultimate wisdom is to realize that there is only one building material capable of withstanding the destruction of time: love. Every act, no matter how small, if done with love, will be inscribed in eternity. St. Paul summarized this wisdom perfectly. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Prophecies will cease, tongues will be stilled, knowledge will pass away. All our works will eventually end. But the work of building love, in our families, in our communities, with strangers, is the only structure we can take with us into eternity. So we have journeyed together through a long and profound path, with 86 philosophies inspired by Jesus' teaching. Wisdom is justified by her works. We started with the simple idea of action, and together we discovered that work is not just what we do with our hands. It is the work of the heart in learning to love, the work of the ears in learning to listen, the work of the will in choosing hope amid countless trials. We have seen that the greatest work is sometimes silence, waiting, or an act of letting go in trust. From this garden of wisdom, it is hoped that each of us recognizes all philosophies, all paths, ultimately lead to a single point. It is not a complex doctrine, but the most vibrant and simple reality: love. In the end, the only work that truly matters, the only structure that endures through time, and the most eloquent proof of true wisdom, is a life lived and acted in love. Our journey of contemplation may pause here, but the journey of action for each person is just beginning. Church Audio invites you. Don't just let these words stay in your mind. Choose one philosophy that resonates with you the most and turn it into one concrete action, no matter how small, today. And please share with us and the community in the comments below. Which philosophy touched you the most? And what small work of love do you plan to do? Every share from you is a candle, helping to illuminate our community. If you found this series meaningful, please give us a like, share it with those you love, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can continue to walk together on the paths of faith and truth. Dear friends, thank you for listening and for joining us. May the peace of God, who is love itself and the source of all good works, be with you and enlighten every step you take. Church Audio respectfully bids you farewell and looks forward to seeing you in our next programs.